What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast with me, Trevor, and I've got Kyle, and I've got two of the dudes from Time Heist, Mark, Dr. Robert Garcia. We seriously appreciate you guys jumping on. Thank you so much. It was funny. You guys hit me up after we posted with Daniel Austin of Die Young, and it was funny. Literally right before you messaged us, Kyle and I were texting. We're like, hey, we should have Time Heist and see if they want to jump on. It was like perfect timing.
Well, I saw if you guys did Daniel Austin, you'll take anybody. So I figured, we'd be good to just hit you up.
Listen, anytime people hit us up, it's like makes us feel really good because we consider ourselves a couple idiots. So, thank you.
On my end, I'm always like, why aren't they asking us? I guess maybe I should just hit up more podcast people and be like, hey, you should put us on.
Dude, absolutely. From our perspective, I'm sure they would love that. So, because I don't know, it's funny. We've been doing this for like a year and a half now, and we've been very fortunate to talk to a lot of cool bands, and everyone's just so nice. Like everyone's just wants to be a part of it and talk, and it's just we kind of get in our own heads with it, So it's hard to get over it.
Yeah, no.
That's cool.
But we're here.
Yeah,
we're here.
Right. Cool. Well, let's jump into a couple things here real fast. I won't go into the whole background and everything like that, but just for you guys together, Mark and Rob, when did you guys meet?
Early 2000s, I think.
I would say sometime between 2004 and 2007. I moved to Denver from Albuquerque in 2004 and started booking shows. And Rob's band, Come Forth by Day, was one of the bands that we used to book as local support for a bunch of shows. So that's how we got to know each other.
Sweet. So the reason why I found out about Time Heist is we had Jay Ost on from Ambitions and With Honor. Oh. And we were like, hey, what was like one of the surprising local scenes that you rolled through that like most people wouldn't expect, maybe off the beaten path? And he said Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hell yeah.
And he was like, I'm pretty sure the dude plays in Time Heist now. He's out in Colorado. And that was the first introduction to Time Heist that I had. Mm-hmm. So you were doing something right down there. How'd you get started with like booking shows and just being involved in the scene in general?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, like Salt Lake's always had like more of an established scene, just because you're like kind of in that path of like Vegas to Salt Lake to Denver, and you guys had like a really strong scene in the '90s. And Albuquerque never. It had a scene, but it wasn't a place where a lot of bands were coming to. So when I was in high school, I had a bunch of friends and we did a zine, and we were like, all right, like we want to see these bands and they never come here. Let's just start contacting them and see if they'll come here. So we had a copy of this zine called Book Your Own Fucking Life that modern Maximum Rock and Roll used to put out, and people could put all their information in there if they book shows or if bands could stay at their houses or whatever. So we got ourselves in there and just started finding. It was kind of right when bands were starting to have websites. And so we would get on the websites and find their contact info and just either call if it was a number or email them if they had an email address and just be like, hey, you should come play Albuquerque. And some bands fell for it and it worked, and they let us book shows for them, and we just kind of went from there and built up a reputation of doing good shows, or at least decent shows that bands could make that long drive from Arizona, hit New Mexico, and then go to Texas or go up to Colorado, and kind of filled in that gap there.
So me and Trevor both grew up in Salt Lake City. I'm down in Dallas now. But I think growing up, we just always assumed that Salt Lake was kind of its own little bubble, right? We had our own little scene. we had bands come through, and for a while their bands quit coming through because there's a bunch of problems or whatever. But we just kind of felt like we were our own little pocket. But now that I've kind of detached myself from that and have been to shows in other places, I kind of realized that Salt Lake City wasn't really as big of a pocket or bubble or detached as some of these places like Albuquerque. Do you think that it's good for a scene because then you feel like you can grow organically, or do you genuinely think like, well, if we had bigger bands come through, it would have helped more? Or do you think that like you had a tighter knit group because it was just you guys in Albuquerque?
I it's kind of like there's like pros and cons, right? Like, so as a small scene, there's not very many local bands to go around. So it's kind of like every time a bigger band goes through and you want to put locals on it, you're putting the same bands on these shows over and over again. Um, but what was cool about being in a very like insulated, remote scene like that is kids just kind of showed up for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't really have like, okay, well, this is the hardcore scene, and this is the punk scene, and this is the oi scene, and this is the ska. Like, if there was a band that came through town, everybody went. And like, I didn't, when I first started going to shows when I was a teenager, I didn't really know the difference between punk and hardcore. Like I thought Agnostic Front was a punk band. I thought
Right.
Shutdown was a punk band. I thought Death by Stereo was a punk band. Like these were all punk bands. And it wasn't until I moved to Colorado that had like a bigger scene that was like a lot more. I don't want to say like segregated, but like there was definitely like a scene for crustier, fast hardcore bands, and there was a scene for like hardcore breakdowns, and there was a scene, like scene for this, scene for that. And I was kind of like weirded out by that when I moved to Colorado because I was like, oh, I like this band, I want to go see them. And people would be like, why do you want to go see that band? Like, well, because they're good. Like, I want to go to they're playing a house. You want to go? No, fuck those kids. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, I like their band, so I'm going to go. And
Yeah.
in Albuquerque, it was a lot more like, oh, holy shit, a band is coming here. All right, we're all going. Like,
Yeah.
didn't really matter.
That's awesome.
So what
Rob,
about for you? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to ask Rob, so are you from Colorado? Is that kind of where?
Yeah, I'm
Cut your
native
teeth
to
in?
Colorado, and so like I was part of the problem. I was like I detested anything that wasn't what I liked. No, 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 no. That's the other thing that was pretty cool about like when we started working with Mark and he started booking us is we were kind of like we were hardcore kids. Like we grew up in the hardcore scene, but we had more of a metal thing to us, and so he had been blink an eye at that. He was like, "Yeah, we'll book you," and he put us. Our first show he booked us was with Down to Nothing, and we were like, "Dude, that's so awesome! Like nobody else would have ever put us with this straight edge hardcore band coming into town because they hear us and they think we want to play with like more metallic stuff." And so like that was kind of a defining moment for us, is because once we got into the hardcore scene, we realized, yeah, this is where we belong, it's where we want to be. And Mark was really the one that gave us that shot. It was pretty cool.
Well, the thing that separated them from all the other bands in Denver at that time was that they were really good at playing their instruments. Um, like, like way more like technically talented than anybody else. So it was kind of cool to have them play shows and just like watch people's jaws drop when they would like, shred on a guitar solo, and like John, their singer, like actually like had a voice. He could like sing. Um, so it was a very cool thing to have in the mix of like putting all these different bands together.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
the divisions like went away at Sock's place where he would book all the shows because like we'd play with the touring hardcore band, but then there'd be a metal band and there'd be a crust punk band and like all that together in the same show. And kids were showing up. That it ebbs and flows, but I remember in that time when he started booking us, it was really cool to be part of that scene, be part of that moment in time for Denver hardcore.
Cool. So let's talk about Denver hardcore, because right now you guys have some heavy freaking bands coming out of there. Like there was Mouth for War, there was 10 to the Chest, which I know they share members and stuff like that. Playing for Keeps, they have some heavy stuff in there. Like, has it always been more maybe like kind of metal and stuff like that, more heavy? Because you guys play very fast.
They're like in the going back to like kind of the earlier like days of Denver hardcore, like at least like the bands that I know of, and Rob, I don't know if you were like around for some of these, but like there were some bands from Denver, like a band called Shogun, who were from Boulder, Angels Never Answer. Um, they were like more like heavier, like late '90s, early 2000s hardcore. Um, the Blackout Pact. Um, so there was like a lot of like heavier stuff happening in Denver. Um, and then there's fast hardcore too, but I think like now you have like a really cool mix of a lot of different kinds of bands that play Denver that can kind of like cross over and play shows with each other. But we are like Time Heist is like we're definitely like further away from I would say really any what anybody else in Denver is doing. Um, Mostly because of like the influences that we have and like the music that we all like. We all like more melodic, or most of us like melodic hardcore, and we're around in like the mid 2000s for like all the Bridge Nine bands and like the Down to Nothings and all that stuff. So um, it is a little bit more difficult for us to fit on bills here, and like win crowds over because like we don't have a lot of like really fast parts. We don't have a lot of breakdowns. So we're not playing that like slam kind of
Mhm.
sound that like a lot of kids are into right now. So um, I think we have a little bit different experience in Denver. Like it's not bad. Um, it's just like we're a little bit more outside the norm of what's going on than most of the other bands that are around right now.
So, do you still book shows?
Yeah, I do. Me and a couple friends book shows under A World Apart Productions.
Um, so you've been doing that for a while. How's it changed through the years? Because one thing that we've talked about is kind of how social media, all these big festivals, it feels like bands don't really tour as much anymore. Like,
How
is that
how
hard? Are you
long
noticing that?
how long do we have on this review? Um,
Yeah.
Rob, you can just drop. We'll just take the rest from here.
No, don't drop because I got another question I want to ask you about
okay,
stuff.
so it is way different now. When I first started booking shows, nobody had a booking agent except for like really big bands. So you could like basically hit up any band and they were probably like working on their own tour. So like some of the first bands that I booked were like Link 80 and the Slackers, and like I booked a bunch of ska shows and like kind of started getting more into hardcore. But like hardly any of these bands had booking agents, and it wasn't really until um, probably like post 2003 2004 that I really started having to deal with booking agents for hardcore bands, and that it like it wasn't very a very cool experience. Um, like I think that's kind of where you started to see a lot of bands like not really trying as hard to establish a connection with people in each scene because they didn't have to, right? Like their booking agent was handling everything, every aspect of like booking the show. So there wasn't a whole lot of personal interaction between the promoter, who was basically just a hardcore kid who liked their band,
Yeah.
who was willing to lose money to bring them to their town, and you started to see like more bands like not really wanting to interact with you until it was time to settle, and then it was like,
Mm.
oh hey, you're Mark, I'm here for our money. And like that wasn't the case with everybody, and not I wouldn't even say like the majority of the bands that I was dealing with. Like in those years, but you could kind of see the beginning of it. And now I feel like a lot of bands who have never toured are coming right out of the gate with a booking agent and a manager and like all these other things, and they have no idea like kind of what it's like to build relationships with people in this scene.
Yeah.
And I think that that is like the soul of hardcore is the connections that we all have with one another through the music. And once we lose that, it's just another industry.
Yeah, 100%.
And it sucks to like we've interacted with like like I'm not gonna like name names, but like we've
Right.
interacted with like bands that it's like their first tour and they're coming to Denver to play a show, and you know we try to like, hey, what's up, like, guys need anything, like, and just like totally ignore us, like in their phones, just, oh hey. And it's like that's not at all how it would have been, you know, like 20 years ago. It would have been like, yo, what's up, like what are we gonna do, let's go hang out, like where's the skate park, where's, you know, let's go get food, like. And now it's just bands roll through town, they're like, oh hey, what's up, and then they play their set and then they're gone.
So, do you think that that's just a symptom of just the world we live in, growing up with smartphones and tablets and all that kind of
I,
stuff? Or
I mean, the smartphones made it easy to get all this stuff done. I mean, like
sure,
I remember getting written letters from bands that wanted to play Albuquerque. Like they would send me a physical press pack with articles that were written, like paper articles that were written about them, and I still have a lot of them. I just keep shit, but like a promo photo, a CD, and then a note that says like, "Hey, you know, we want to come through your town. We're booking a tour. Here's our phone number. Give us a call if it's cool, if you want to book a show for us."
Yeah.
And like that was kind of like I would love coming home. I was in high school, and I would love coming home from school to my I was still living with my parents, and there would be a package for me on the table, and it's like, oh sweet, like what band is this? And you know, crack it open, listen to the CD, call them up, and I made a new friend. I got into a new band, and it was
sweet.
like starting a relationship, and like a lot of those people like I'm still friends with today.
Yeah.
And the interaction that you have now, it's like you get a call from the booking agent like, oh, I'm looking at avails for this date, the guarantee is blah blah blah, can we confirm? And there's no like love to it.
Yeah.
It's becoming all business, and
Mm,
that sucks.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it has to, like, the smartphones would just make it easier to be homies, but it's kind of the fact that like the bands can make money off of it now, especially
yeah,
like post COVID, and it's becoming a business. It's becoming an industry and less of a subculture.
Yeah. So that
interesting.
kind of leads me into my next question about this. And I want to hear from Rob as well, because I mean, you've played in bands and stuff too, but does touring have the same effect nowadays? I mean, I see you guys touring all the time, right? It seems like you guys play shows all the time, but there's some of these bands that seem like they've gotten pretty big, but they're like festivals every few months, a weekend tour, which that's fine for, like, you know, I understand a lot of local bands, like they're doing this because it is their passion, but it doesn't seem like it's got the same appeal to be a road dog out there touring all the time anymore. Is that the sentiment you guys get too?
It's probably like geographic based. So like we do, like, touring in Europe is way different than touring in the States, right? And so like I think there's that perspective of like the community building is there in Europe, and so you showing up, you know, there's already a group of people waiting for you. They're like, how can we help you out? Like that perspective, I think that which was originally probably more present in earlier hardcore in the States still exists over there. Over here, there is a little bit of that sort of like business perspective or that, that mindset, like where it's business first. It's these sort of like capital interactions, right? That they're going for, and that kind of like, it kind of perverted it to where it gets a little ugly. It doesn't have the same sort of, like community that it once had. So in that sense, it's a little disappointing. But at the same time, like we can't survive off of touring the way you could in the early 2000s.
Mm.
Like asking for a guarantee and everything, like that money only gets you so far for gas now, like than it did before. Like the value, like everything just costs so much more. So I understand, I get it. Like if you want to do this for a good amount of time, that financial piece is like it's sort of an ugly necessity that exists there. So that's kind of warped it and kind of perverted it to be what it is now. So I don't blame bands for working with an agent who's going to negotiate a guarantee for them now and trying to make it work and everything, because that's kind of what it's like. But we've had the pleasure of like, going outside the States and seeing maybe something a little more pure. And so I think once bands get to do that, I think they can get exposed to what that life is like and hopefully bring some of that back to the US. But I don't know, would you agree with that, Mark, that it seems like there is still like a disconnect or like there's a disparity between the two perspectives?
I mean, I think anybody that's like toured the United States and then toured Europe and come back, like it is such an eye-opening experience of how different it is. Like before I went over to Europe, um, I went over like the first time in 2018 doing merch for another band. And, I had like heard like, oh yeah, it's totally different. Like it's, way better. Like they take care of you. And I was like, yeah, like sure that whatever. Like it's probably not that different. It is completely different. Um, it still has that soul. It still has that like you show up and like the person that booked the show is somebody who really likes your band and they want to meet you and they want to talk to you and they want to hang out and they want to bro down and they're going to be watching your band when you play and they're going to be singing along and all their friends are going to like, and then like the hospitality is just like totally different. You're going to have a place to stay 90% of the time that you're coming through. You're going to get fed. You're like, there's just like so much more thought of, but they have a very like different infrastructure for the arts than we do in the United States. A lot of that stuff is subsidized. So like, a lot of the like festivals and shows, like they have like community centers that they can do shows at for free. They have art spaces that they can do shows at for free. The city fund the arts in a different way so they can use money that's provided to them by the city to cover like some of these costs and whatnot. And you really don't have that in the United States. You have um, you have kids that are doing it on their own,
Yeah.
or you have like big production companies and stuff like that are doing it. um, but even then, when they have like a little bit more money to play with, if you're not playing like a 500 plus cap room, you're probably not going to get like as many of the accommodations as like those bigger bands would get. So it's it's like I did kind of like an experiment when Praise came out here after we had been to Europe, because we had got like when you go to Europe, like you kind of get the same breakfast everywhere you stay. When you stay at someone's house, it's like breads and like vegan deli meats and fruits, and it's a whole kind of spread.
Peanut
So
butter, Nutella,
yeah,
yeah,
and so
coffee.
I messaged Bence, who we had stayed with uh, in Hungary,
Mm.
and I hit him up and I was like, "Hey, give me your shopping list for like what you would get for a band that stays at your house." And he sent me his list, and I went to the grocery store and I bought all the stuff. Like there was a couple things that like like they didn't have that
Yeah.
they're like American versions of or whatever, or like I knew people wouldn't want, and like got my receipt and I hit him up and I was like, okay, how much do you spend on this? and like did the conversion. And for me to buy the same stuff, it was probably like a third more than what he spent on it. But so that's not like a ton, right? So like to stash away an extra like 30 or 40 bucks from the door and like provide a cool breakfast like that
Mm-hmm.
for the band,
Sure.
it's really not that like like unreasonable. Like it's not impossible, but like I think the margins are way smaller when you do shows in the US. Like you're giving most of the money to the band so they can pay for gas or whatever, so you're not going to have a lot of extra money to like pay for the breakfast or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's you get it one way or the other, but like the hospitality is really cool to have that. And like to wake up in the morning in a stranger's house and they've like made this like beautiful spread of breakfast for you. Like
I think it was
Yeah.
Contention was telling us that when they went over to Europe, they were just saying like, again, every night they knew they had a place to stay. They just felt like maybe the people felt almost like obligated just because like that's just kind of the culture that they have over there. It's
mhm.
interesting. It's cool. It's a cool thing.
It's
Well,
awesome.
and they have a lot of those places have like a more communal culture, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're it's more like community oriented. It's not as individualistic. So they already have that mentality of like these are friends. We should take care of them
Mm.
rather than like, all right, here's your money now, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Remember we stayed
So
at this guy's apartment, and they had an elevator, so that was nice, right? We're on the elevator, and he kept apologizing to us because it was a small apartment. And we're like, dude, we're just glad we have a place to sleep. And then they let us in the house, and then they left and like let us stay at their apartment. They're like, we're going to stay at my parents' house that night. And they
oh
were like, they're
dang.
just trusting these strangers to stay in their apartment, and they were apologizing for their apartment being what it was. And we're like, dude, this is awesome. We're not sleeping in the van. Like we're 100% grateful that we can do this. And I did his dishes the next morning, and everyone was like, dude, I feel bad. Like they just left us here, and they're trusting us with their stuff. So I was like just cleaning their kitchen,
Dude, that's awesome though.
You
Yeah.
guys
That's
will have
awesome.
to stay with me if you come to Dallas, and I'll be able to mow the lawn or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I did have a question for Rob. So you are involved in University of Colorado, right?
Yeah.
How is like has this music seeped more, or do you think less into colleges? I remember going to college, and there were always people with stands with booths that were handing out pamphlets. You would have saw a hardcore show as well, right? Like, do
Mhm.
you see this stuff creeping in to college kids more? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I just want to understand what you've seen on campuses and stuff.
Yeah, it's a little different from my perspective for a couple of reasons. One is like, so I do work for the University of Colorado in Boulder, and Boulder is kind of like this white bubble, this very privileged sort of town that's on the foothill. It's beautiful there, and and it is. I wish I could afford to live there, right? But so there is a different sort of perspective that kind of like the hardcore scene does not really penetrate that campus in a lot of ways. However, and I would have said more on that. But we just played in Boulder for the first time in my life. I've never been played at a show in Boulder. And we got asked to play this DIY show. These kids were just like, "Hey, will you guys do it?" We're like, "Yeah, of course." And then they were kind of like surprised that we'd play it. We're like, "Yeah, dude, like we've never done Boulder. Let's go for it." And the place was packed. Like it was upstairs in this like old church, and the floor started bowing because there were so many kids there. So they moved it from the upstairs to the main floor, and they just moved some furniture around. And it was one of the funnest shows in Colorado we've ever played. And that was just right across the street from campus. So to my
Sweet.
surprise, in Boulder, in this sort of bubble that I was describing, there was a scene, and we were really lucky that they asked us to do that because it was freaking awesome to be a part of. Um, now the other thing that's different about what I do is kind of outside of campus. So I am a professor, but I also have a scholarship program, and my program's for migrant seasonal farm worker students. So if the students or their parents came to the U.S. or travel around or work in sort of migrant agriculture, like in the fields or greenhouses, stuff like that, then they get a scholarship. So we'll pay for them to start school because there is a gap there in that population and like access to higher ed and completion. So that's kind of like my field, like in migrant ed, and so that within that demographic, you're not going to see a lot of hardcore kids, right?
Right.
So it's I do like, it's like two different worlds that I traverse between the hardcore scene and my work I do, but there's definitely an overlap. Like there's a Venn diagram in the sense that the work that we do is definitely social justice based, just as like the scene is very much a social justice sort of like entity. So it's not a strange sort of pairing. It's just two different demographics that I'm hang out with all the time.
Yeah.
So are
Yeah,
people
no.
ever surprised by when they hear you're in a band and what the band sounds like and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
but colleagues are like, because I'll go and like, like do like a keynote at a conference, and they'll see like, hey, I looked you up. I saw you're in a band. Like, send me your music or whatever. Or, like, I'll go see you guys. I'm like, I don't think you want to see us. And I don't think you want to. Like, and I don't want to like force it on them and then be like have to fake like they liked it. Like
Right.
it's a little niche what we do. So like I say that's cool, man. Yeah, I'll send you a link or whatever, and I don't expect to hear from them. Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Like I do the same thing with the podcast. I don't think that any of like my family actually knows I do a podcast. I've been doing
Yeah.
it for 2 years
Yeah.
because I'm like, you're going to listen to an episode, you're going to look up the band, and you're just going to have a completely different opinion on what I do.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. We love it. Why? Because we love it. So uh, let's talk about Time Heist then. Colorado, weed is legal. How's it being straight edge in Colorado?
Um,
It's easy when you're high all the time.
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's so it's not like it was really bad. Like right when weed was legalized,
Right.
because like right off the bat, like every place in Colorado that had been like an abandoned storefront from like that economic downturn in 2008 was all of a sudden a dispensary, and like people were like moving here left and right, like like to open weed businesses and stuff like that. And so it was kind of like living in an issue of high times for a little bit. But like I think like the thing about Denver is it has such like, even aside from weed, it has such like a craft brewery culture and like a jam band culture
Yeah.
that um a lot of people that you meet are like really confused when you're like, yeah, I don't drink, and they're like, what? Like, what do you mean you don't drink? Like, well, like, what do you do then? Like, I don't know, I live, like, I exist, like. But it is like, now that like being sober curious is like becoming trendy, and like NA beer is really big, and there's like NA cocktails and stuff like that, and like it's this kind of like health trend. Um, it's kind of like not as weird for people when you tell them that you don't drink. They're like, oh, like, are you doing dry January? Like, no, I'm doing dry life, but that's cool that you're doing dry January. But like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like, I don't, everybody in Denver does coke too, and
Yeah.
so that's like, that's, nobody like talks about that, but like I would say cocaine is probably like more popular in like the subcultures here than weed is. So like it's almost more weird that you don't do coke than that you don't smoke weed. Um, but like I probably have like a lot different experience with that than Robert does, because like I work in the music industry. Like I work for one of the bigger promoters, and I do like security and stuff in operations and stuff like that. And so I see a lot more of like the nightlife culture, and like interact with more people that are involved in that. Um, and like you definitely get people that are like, oh, like, well, I guess we won't invite you to blah blah blah. And it's like, I like to hang out. I'm
Right.
just not going to get fucked up. Like,
Yeah.
one of you is going to need a ride home. Like, I got you. Um, but yeah, I mean, but I think kind of everywhere is becoming like that, because recreational marijuana, medicinal marijuana is becoming legal kind of everywhere. And so, you add that to, just the overall culture that, is like substances, alcohol, like that kind of stuff is like already very popular. Um, and I think, yeah, so being straight edge is weird. Like anybody that ever said like, oh, you're only being straight edge because it's cool. Like being straight edge is the least cool thing that you can do. It's like pretty much guaranteeing that you're going to put a dent in your social life or your career life. And like Robert can probably speak more to this like on a professional level, but like when you go to conferences, like is it weird for people when you go to like cocktail hour and you're not drinking?
Well, it's weird also because like Robert's the rock star tours in a band too, so it's like, oh, they think they're gonna connect with me at this. It's like, no, dude, I don't want to do this. Like, you're not cool in my opinion, right? Just because you do that, like, it doesn't make you like connect with the rock star, right? I'm not even a rock star in their opinion. Like, then it's like, oh, he's kind of boring, you know. So yeah, the norms are there; they're seeped in, so it kind of makes being straight edge a little more pronounced, right? It's a little bit bigger of a statement when it's definitely against the grain over here. So yeah, it's not weird. It's kind of like more of a badge of honor to wear, like when you're in a place where it's so common.
Yeah.
I mean,
Me and,
listen, go for it, Kyle.
no, I was just gonna say, me and Trevor both have careers where we do conferences and crap like that, and you know, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
What's funny is like a few of my coworkers, we went to Furnace Fest this last year, and like I was showing a couple of my friends at work like some videos of me moshing and stuff, and they're like, "You do that sober?" And I was like, "You'd be surprised. Like most of these guys, like you know, are sober. Like we're all sober and stuff, dude. Like it's you know feels better getting punched when you're sober. I guess I don't know, but it's just yeah, it's the same thing. Like they're all drinking, and you know, I'm sitting there with like a Sprite or whatever, and it's you know, it is like a badge of honor. Like you know, I don't like look down on them, but it's like yeah, you know, I can sit here and have fun and live my life like you said without having to you know put something else in my body that shouldn't be there. So yeah.
So what led you guys to being straight edge? Let me ask you guys that.
Yeah, it's probably different for both of us. I grew up around it. So I grew up in a really small rural town that was known for like really two things. One is like stray dogs, like people would leave their dogs there. So there were stray dogs running around everywhere, and then drugs. Like so that's where you go to buy drugs. That's where you will sell drugs. A lot of my family members did that, and so like I was like immersed in it growing up a lot. And so like I visited. I always tell my students like I visited more prisons growing up than I did colleges, right? And so, like, I'm all for the legalization of it because if it keeps, you know, people I know out from going to jail for petty things, you know, like it, you know, it shouldn't be illegal. We don't need to fill prisons with people just doing that, right? So, like, it was just kind of cemented in me early on, like, what are the consequences of living this lifestyle? So I kind of ran in the opposite direction because what I was exposed to, just kind of breaking the cycle in that sense. So that's what it was for me. Like, and I was made that decision before I even knew what straight edge was. Like, I don't know. Like, was it similar for you, Mark?
I mean, it wasn't as like environmentally it was way different. Like I didn't really my family like my dad wasn't he was a smoker, but he like didn't drink a lot. He didn't do drugs. I don't remember like ever seeing my mom drink when I was growing up. Like maybe like a glass of wine like on a special occasion or whatever, but like substances weren't like a really like were a thing in my family. But like in Albuquerque, Albuquerque has like one of or had I don't know if it still does, but had like one of the worst drunk driving problems in the country, and it was like you know all the time you would just hear these stories or see it on the news like you know family of five is killed by a drunk driver and the drunk driver survives, and that was just like something that was just happening like around me all the time, like seeing drunk driving accidents. Like I remember I was coming home for a show one night and I was driving up Central Avenue, which is kind of like the you know that's where like all the clubs are, that's where like all the cool record stores are, and I saw this guy t-bone somebody in an intersection, and it was like a movie. Like the car door opened, and as the guy that hit the person was getting out, beer cans just like flooded out of his car. And it was just like, dude, what the fuck? So just kind of like being exposed to that, like, you know, made me more mindful about like the consequences of like substance abuse. And then, you know, my I didn't have any like real crazy experiences with my own substance use. Like I drank and I smoked weed, but I was always the kind of person that, like, you know, if everybody else was like going to do acid, I would be like, nah, I don't really want to do that. Like that just doesn't sound like a fun time. And for me, it was like a lot about like having personal responsibility and having, um, you know, control over myself and like what was going on around me. Like I didn't want to be out of control. Um, and when I, you know, did drink or whatever, as soon as I would get drunk, I would be like, I want this to be over right now. And couldn't that, you know, that doesn't happen. So it would like stress me out, and it just like wasn't a fun experience. And then, um, you know, when I finally like quit everything and I was like aware of straight edge, like I was into hardcore, and was just like, you know what, like I think I'm gonna claim edge. And it was like it was like a big decision for me, because I was like, if I'm gonna do this, this is gonna be for the rest of my life. If I even have an inkling that this might not be something that I will hold on to, I shouldn't do it. And like finally made the commitment and never looked back.
It's awesome.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously, Time Heist, you guys are a straight edge band, right? So you have a very youth crew sound, point influences from the 80s, early 2000s, stuff along those lines. One of the things that caught me on Time Heist is a lot of your songs feel very anthemy. And I say that is like the most praise I can give you, right? I'm not saying that is like
That's what
as
we're going for. Yeah.
sure. So I wanted to ask you about that though, because like I said, it's an anthem. It feels like something that we can sing along to. It feels like those old 80s style, like things that everyone would pile on for and want to sing along to. Why did you guys choose to go down kind of this route in terms of like the lyrics and this style and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, like for for the lyrics, I wanted to do something positive. Like I wanted to do a band that was really about a lot of the things that I heard in hardcore that made me fall in love with it. And it's like you know, I'm older, and in a way I kind of like look at it like I'm giving something back to younger kids who like need to hear that stuff. Especially like with everything that's like going on right now, um, in politics, like in the world. I think that there's a space and a need for those like a kind of like uplifting messages. Um, and I know that it resonates with people. Like I've heard from, we get messages from people that are like, hey, like, you know, you know, I was like feeling really down, and I listen to this one song of yours when I wake up in the morning, and it gets me out of bed and it gets me going through the day. Um, we got a message from one person that said that, you know, our music got them through their custody battle. Um, and it's, you know, that stuff's really cool to hear. Like I would rather someone say something like that to me than, you know, oh yeah, like, you know, you guys have like the hardest breakdown, or like kick someone in the face to it. Like that's cool. Like moshing is awesome. Like I like to kick people in the face. Um, but I think hardcore is so much more than that. I think it's, you know, it really means something. And I know Robert feels this way too, and the other guys in the band. Like it genuinely like means something to us. And I think we do what we do because we want to pass that on to other people, especially younger kids that are coming into the scene.
Awesome. Robert, in terms of like writing the guitar parts and everything along those lines, I mean, Come Forth by Day was a lot more metallic, a lot
Mhm.
more heavy and stuff like that. So why kind of the youth crew style? I mean, obviously because of the message like Mark talked about and everything like that, but how is it writing this style of music?
Well, I think like it's not like an abandonment from that because I think what resonates still is like the energy and that sort of like that
100%.
drive is still there, right? I think what like what's cool about like the five of us, like especially this instrumentalist, like we do have this maybe a little bit of ability. Like I'm older too. I've been playing for a long time, so I know my way around the fretboard. But we're not shredding. So what we're doing is we're fine tuning that. Like we're harnessing that energy to make like more epic songs. So how do we structure the song so that it lives up to sort of that bar that's set by the lyrics, right? So if the lyrics are going to have this driving positive message that kind of resonates with people, the song should sound just as strong and just as epic. So it's less about like like thrilling people with like with shreds and arpeggios and stuff, but instead like how do you make the song as dynamic and full and high energy as possible so it still drives that same note without the frills. Like you don't need to shine up, you don't have to chrome on your car to know that that car runs better than the rest of them, right? So I think that's kind of like where we kind of shine if we're going to go with that analogy, right? Is that we have this musicianship to us, but we harness it to kind of like bolster that sort of high standard with the lyrics. So the music's going to feel that way too.
Awesome.
Do,
So go ahead, Kyle.
do you feel like kids know what to do when they listen to you, especially younger kids? Not at all.
Not in Denver.
I was
No,
actually just going to
not at
ask
all.
this.
Not at all.
So
Two
let
of
me
them. Marco,
let me say it this way, real quick. You guys are coming through here in a couple weeks, okay? What is your favorite thing to see being the band up on stage for the crowd to do? Do you want to see a circle pit? Do you want to see the two-step? Do you want to see the pile-on? What is your guys' favorite thing as the band to see happen?
Yeah, I love it when they stand in the back.
along with the merch table when we're done. No, just kidding. No,
A
I
credit
like
card.
sing-alongs. Sing-alongs. There is no greater feeling in the world than standing up on stage and having kids scream these like thoughts that you had back at you. Like it's the coolest fucking thing. Um, so yeah, I would definitely say like the sing along, the pile on, and like we don't get that in Denver. Like that's not it's a lost art here. Shout out to Bella and Marcos. They're the only two that come up front and sing along. Um, but or Nella, sorry, Nella, um, Nella and Marcos. But yeah, the when we've been to Europe, we get the sing-alongs, and that it's awesome. But we'll take a two-step, we'll take a circle pit. Not going to turn my nose up to any of that, but if I get to pick, it's definitely the sing-along.
Awesome. What about you, Rob? Is that what you like
Yeah,
too?
same man. Like if the music we do resonates with people and however they want to express it, I'm excited that they're stoked too. Like, and that was one we played this show in this weird industrial area in Budapest, and we headlined this show and like, what are we doing here? Are people going to show up? And like, just the place filled up, and there are people that knew all the words. Like, there was this guy that stood in the middle of the pit, like just stood taller and knew every single word to every song we did, even the covers. And I would like glance at him and just be like, I can't believe this is really happening. This is unreal. It was the coolest thing ever, right? So if we could figure out a way to harness, like get that to happen in the States, it'd be awesome. But if we have to travel across the sea to get it, then we'll do it.
It'll
Listen,
like when we played in California, people have sung along, and I think that's we haven't really played. We've played more shows outside of the United States than we have in the United States, and before people chalk that up to like touring in Denver or touring in Europe is better, people in Europe hit us up more than
Yeah.
people in the States do. So if like 30 people from Delaware were hitting us up to come play Delaware, we would go play Delaware. But like, people in random German towns are like, when are you coming to our town? Your last album was better than your new one, but we still want to see like um, that we get more interaction from people in Europe. So I would like if you're listening to this and you want us to play your town, like send us a message. and we'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Dallas.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're
Okay.
working on it.
Well,
I'll come. Look, we talked about this earlier. I'll come hang out with you guys. We'll go get some barbecue or something. And you know,
It's when I saw that Dai Young was getting back together, I like immediately hit up Daniel and was like, "When are we going on tour?" Like,
yeah,
I want to talk about Daniel for a second. First of all, he is the Paul Rudd of hardcore. He has not aged a fucking day since 2002. He looks exactly the fucking same. That dude also remembers what shirt I was wearing when he met me.
it's
Like
wild.
that, you don't meet people like that very often. So like much love and respect to Daniel. He's one of my favorite people in hardcore. And like I was so stoked when I saw that Dai Young was getting back together, because if anybody is going to get up on stage and get these kids to think, it's going to be Daniel.
yeah.
Like he has some really cool shit to say, and I really hope people listen to him.
He was incredible to talk to. We were super lucky that he agreed to talk to us. And he was more than generous with like everything. Like he sent us a link to their demo, like all of it. Like it was awesome.
Yeah.
And like we said, we're a couple of nobodies. We're idiots. You know what I mean? We do this more for like our own entertainment than anyone else kind of thing, you know?
That's the best reason to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like we just like talking to you guys. So, well, that's really cool. So let's talk about this little run that you guys have. You guys are linking up with Firestarter. How did that come together? And kind of just run me through what the route's going to be real quick.
Well, so we're only doing 2 shows with them. We're doing Denver and we're doing Salt Lake. And we had originally tried to get on the New Mexico show. And that bill was full. And so we were like, shit, okay, well, we'll just be happy with playing the Denver show with them. And then their booking person hit us up and was like, hey, do you guys want to play the Salt Lake show? And I was like, yeah, like we could probably do that. Like, let me look at flights. And it's like $60 each way to Salt Lake City. And we like whenever we go out, we always fly Southwest, so we have points and all that shit. And so like the flights were really cheap, so we're like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. So we're flying in. We're gonna be in Salt Lake for I think 13 hours total.
Oh, for real?
Like we'll fly in, we'll get food, we'll go play the show, we'll go get food again, and then we'll go back to the airport.
Oh, sick. Well, that's awesome. I'm actually going to be in California, but I fly in when the show's happening. So like, no, I'm coming from the airport to the show.
Okay.
So like I should be there. I land at like 8:00, and so I should be there.
Okay.
So it's only like a 25-minute drive, 30-minute drive up to the venue. So it shouldn't be too bad. But I was hoping I tried to actually come home earlier in the day. I messaged my boss. I was like, can I catch an earlier flight? And she's like, no, you can't. I was like, I'll take it. So, but I was going to hit you guys up and be like, you want to grab dinner or something? But yeah, unfortunately, I'll just have to buy a shirt or something from you guys. So I'll be sure
we can get Del Taco after the show.
Oh,
or I don't know, what's the good late night food spot in Salt Lake, Ogden?
Beto's and Rancheritos, if we're going like Mexican style burritos and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't know if you want to eat it and then hop on a flight after, but you know,
it's like a 45-minute flight. It'll be fine. But
Beto's is like pretty. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say Beto's is you either win or you lose really bad on it. So you know, it's a risk you have to. Weigh.
Is it? Do you win just by eating it and then lose afterwards, or it's like? Okay, I'm willing to take that risk. They have vegan stuff.
I'm sure that you could make it vegan.
Okay. Yeah,
but
like Salt Lake, the thing that I love about Salt Lake is like you guys have an insane amount of vegan restaurants and vegetarian restaurants, like way more than other cities, which is super cool. Um,
Yeah.
I'm also like I'm gonna admit this. I'm a really big Real Housewives of Salt Lake fan. Um, so lots of reasons to love your city. I know they live in like Park City, but or
I think some of them are just on the bench there in Salt Lake. Like you could go drive around the Capitol and probably find one of them. You're good. So,
okay.
Salt Lake has the best housewives.
Yo, they're the
absolutely.
messiest out of like the whole all the franchises, and it's super entertaining. They're
I
also
just
like all like newly rich and not old money, so they're like
Sure.
they just wow the fuck out. It's awesome.
Yeah. I
my
mean,
wife
Utah
was
in general has kind of become that. We had a lot of California move in and stuff like that. And then the
Hmm.
Silicon Slopes down towards like Provo and stuff blew up. So we had a lot of tech really like erupt out here and then just some
Hmm.
people move in. And
um,
it's changed our demographic quite a bit. But that's
Well, the
cool.
guy that bought the hockey team is a tech bro, right? Like
Yeah, Ryan Smith.
he's
Yeah.
yeah, he's more, he owns. Does he
The
own
Jazz too.
the Jazz too? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. He's majority owner on that. And
was
then
he
he
from
actually
Qualtrics? Qualtrics,
Yeah,
yeah.
Qualtrics. He's the guy who started Qualtrics. He actually owns part of the soccer team too, Real Salt Lake.
Oh,
So
okay.
he just everything out here. He's just taking it over. Baseball team
Yeah.
when it comes, he'll just own it all.
We have Stan Kroenke, and he owns like the Avs, the Rapids, the
Oh yeah,
Mammoth, the
yeah.
lacrosse team, like the Nuggets, like all that shit. So
We grew up playing lacrosse, and so like Mammoth was always a really cool team to go see. I went and saw an indoor game one time when I was out there, and it was way fun.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
they still do them. They used to have an arena football team too. Those games, the Colorado
Oh yeah, I
Crush.
remember those.
Yeah, that shit was fun.
Didn't they win it the first season too? The arena football team.
I
I
think
thought
they
they did.
did. Yeah, and like John Elway owned it. Yeah.
huh? That's dope. Well, I'm super stoked to have you guys out here. Kyle, do you have anything else for these guys?
No, I appreciate you guys jumping on. Uh, every time we get to talk to a band like you guys, it's a good time. So we're fans of you guys. We're fans of your music. So hopefully I can get to see it. Seems like Trevor's gonna be able to.
We'll make it out. We'll make it out to Dallas. Yeah.
I,
Either Daniel will make it happen or Liberty and Justice will make it happen. So
there you go.
Sick.
I'm telling you, like, you guys have been shouted out by a lot of folks that we've talked to. So
awesome.
you guys are doing something right. Just so you're aware, you are very well liked within the community from the
Awesome.
people that we're hanging out with and we're talking to as well.
It's
The
like
last,
it's like Michael
oh,
Scott on The Office, where he was like, "Pam's a wonderful person, but I'll never say it to her face." That's kind of the feeling we get from these bands. They're all like, "Tom Heist is great, but we'll never say it to him." You know?
we'll never tell her.
I could find a list of bands that don't like me. So if you guys want that, I can take it out.
But
It'd be nice
go
to
for
hear
it.
it in my face, though.
Well, I'm telling you,
Yeah,
behind your back, people love you. So
sick.
I picked up the vinyl, The Odds Against Tomorrow. It's fantastic. With Every Passing Moment is fantastic. I've had conversations with people out here who just love that album. So I'm super stoked that you guys are going to be out this way. Do you guys have new music coming out? What is the plan for the future? What's going on with Time Heist?
Do you want to tell?
Yeah, next month we got a 7-inch
Sick.
with Heroes and Martyrs, so we're pretty stoked about that. These songs like next level for us, and so it kind of like would be a hint to what's coming up next too. So then, after that, after these couple of Firestarter shows, we're finally going to hit the South, which is cool for a run there, and then Europe in May. Is there something between that? Europe in
Yeah.
May.
We're hitting like the Southwest and we're doing the Midwest for the first time. So we're playing like Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Kansas City, doing all those spots for the first time. And then in April, we're doing a couple shows with Over My Dead Body in Southern California, and
Oh,
then
cool.
a couple other shows with Shutdown that haven't been announced yet. But Bay Area, LA, we're
Yeah.
gonna go hit all those spots over a weekend, and then back to Europe. And then in the fall, we're going to try to hit the Northwest. We're going to try to hit Mexico. We're
Sick.
talking to somebody going down there, and then maybe back to Europe in November. We'll see how it shakes out.
Sick. Last
And
question I
then
have.
Dallas.
Oh, go ahead. And Dallas, yeah, just for Kyle.
Just for
Playing
me.
it, just an acoustic
Wow.
set. You're good. So, I put it out there. If anyone had like a question or something for a straight edge band, and the only question I had was if you could revive one old straight edge band, which band would it be?
Oh dang!
That's a tough
I mean,
question.
they've all gotten back together. Like it's
Oh,
Yeah,
there's no
done one off here and there. Yeah.
there's no more.
Let's say they haven't played in the last 3 years.
Good, clean fun.
No, absolutely not. No. That might be an off-camera conversation, but absolutely not. Man, One Up.
Okay.
Yeah, that band was awesome, and like the stuff that they were doing towards the end of the band that was like sounding more the uh, like newer era Turning Point
Yeah.
was so good. I really like that band. So that would probably be my pick, like One Up to start playing shows again.
Sick. Dr.
Yeah,
Rob?
I'll double down on One Up because every band I keep thinking of like has like a sold out member, and that's not going to fill them right. You know, so that would be the thing I'd want to reverse. I would want to like, could you go back in time and just like undo that? And then that opens up more doors. So I'll just double down on One Up and like just say that yeah, we I can't wait until the day comes when we can have a reunion and then be bigger when we come back around.
God,
You guys
I
will do
hope
the
so.
festival circuit. You know,
Should I should say which one of you is going to be the sellout, but I won't go that far.
We have money down on it. We'll see.
Yeah.
What?
Who's the first?
You guys must be betting on me because I don't know about this. Well, we convinced our drummer to be straight edge. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, because he like when he joined the band, he was like, yeah, I don't. It's so okay. If you're listening to this and you have a kid, teach them how to play drums. Don't even send them to college. Just make them a drummer. The hardcore scene needs more drummers. But it's hard to find a straight edge drummer, right? So we were like, okay, we'll try to find somebody who's like sober or like doesn't party super hard. So we found Raphael, and he's like, oh yeah, I drink like every once in a while. We're like, that works. We'll take it. And we kind of like joke with him like, hey, when are you gonna be straight edge? Like, are you got to make this like real straight edge, man. And we were in New York after that last like little East Coast disaster that we did, and we're walking on was it Fifth Avenue? I think it was Fifth
Yeah,
Avenue.
near Fifth Avenue.
And we walked past a Swatch store, and he was like, do you think they sell X watches? And like we all stopped in our tracks and like looked at him like, what are you trying to say? Are you straight edge? And he was like, yep. And we were like, yeah. And we like booked it like through traffic around.
We even offered to buy the watch for him. We're like, dude, you put your wallet away. We're just gonna buy this for you.
Yeah. And they didn't have one at the store. And we were like, okay, well, when we get back to the place we're staying, we'll order one for you. And my friend Sarah, who we were staying with, had an extra one, so she sold him hers.
Oh, sick. Well,
So
there we go.
That was a great moment in the band. And then he told us he was going to law school.
so he sobers up and then he's like, I'm going to do law school, guys. It's a good story.
Well, he got like, shout out to Raphael. He scored himself a full ride scholarship to University of Minnesota for law school. So
it's amazing.
I can't I could try to tell him to throw his life away for hardcore, but I shouldn't.
Well,
Amazing.
so you guys are playing with Forever War when you guys come out to Salt Lake. And if you
Mhm.
haven't seen it yet, look at Chris Carnot's TikTok. His son, 8 years old, hopped on and played one of the end of the songs for Forever War. It was like one of the
Sick.
best Salt Lake City 2024 moments last year. So it was way dope.
I think I'm too old for TikTok. That's not.
It's
Um,
on
I'm
Instagram too. I mean, it's
okay. I was
somewhere.
gonna say I'm stopping at
We'll
Instagram.
find it.
That's yeah.
I'll find
That's
it.
the
I'll
last
send
social
it to
media.
you. But yeah, shout out Forever War. We got an 8-year-old prodigy coming up. Salt Lake will live on forever in hardcore. So
Yes.
we're good to go.
Hope he's ready to play in 6 bands.
Yeah.
For one time.
As is
Awesome.
tradition.
Well, guys, seriously, we appreciate it. We don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for coming. I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Kyle, screw
Oh
Kyle.
yeah.
Don't go to Dallas.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
So, okay.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us,
so much
guys. We
for having me.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.